And also, look, anything worth doing is going to be difficult to do. I think there's a like we all want to get a TV series, and we all want to get a radio series, and we all want to get a stand-up special, or we want to get on this program or that program. And the reality of the situation is there aren't a huge number of those opportunities knocking around. So I don't actually think that 8 years was was a long time, really. I'd rather it took 8 years and turned out how it did than I got it in a year.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Today's guest has great insights. He's a great conversationalist and an all-round great guy. I had a brilliant, in-depth chat with Garrett. I love his honesty. It's rare. It's courageous. Plus, he's self-reflective and empowering. All the tools for a great chat and a deep dive. I also love how Garrett's been able to look within and reflect, an important yet crucially underrated skill we could all do with. This was a blast, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Okay, let's get into it. Garrett Millerick is an acclaimed stand-up comedian, writer, and director whose unique and versatile style has made him a favourite on the UK and international comedy circuits. A frequent critic's choice, he's appeared on Conan, SiriusXM, and more. His breakout live show, Sunflower, became one of the most talked about performances of 2018. He also recently wrote and starred in Do-Gooders, a workplace sitcom for BBC Radio 4 that takes audiences behind the curtain of the charity industry alongside an incredible cast. His 2022 smash hit show, I'm Just Trying to Help, is making its eagerly awaited debut as a streamable comedy special on the prestigious 800-pound gorilla platform, following a celebrated run at Edinburgh Fringe and sellout performances at the Soho Theatre. Garrett's intensely funny take on modern life is more relevant now, 3 years after it debuted, than ever before. I've watched it. It's hilarious. If you want to watch it, it's in the episode notes below. Check it out. It's great. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about his brand new comedy special, Edinburgh, sobriety, do-gooders, inspiring teachers, transitioning to comedy, gratitude lists, losing weight, perseverance and determination, plus plenty more. Before we get into this epic chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out at 3:30 Melbourne, Australian time, with the full video of the podcast to be released the following day. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's get into it. I'm obsessed with people's mentors and teachers. I'd love to know what Dr. Andrew Nash has done and how he's inspired you.
Ah, Dr. Andrew Nash. How did you find out about Dr. Andrew Nash?
I know everything.
You know everything. Well, that's cool. Dr. Andrew Nash, he was my English teacher at school. And I wasn't, when I was at school, English wasn't my subject. Writing wasn't my subject. I'd always done drama.
Interesting.
But academically, I was more in line with, maths and sciences and things. But that wasn't what I was interested in. It was just, I just scored better grades there. And I found it quite difficult to get my ideas down on paper. And when I was, I think, 15, just going into, so we have A levels here, actually they don't have them anymore, but you have GCSEs, and then you go and in your final 2 years when I was at school, you specialize in 3 subjects. So you've got to pick down from 12 to 3.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. He encouraged me when I was 15 to do English. He was like, you could really do this. You've got some talent here. and that was not something necessarily on paper that was true, but he saw something in me and really encouraged me to go down that route. And then from his, he was the most remarkable teacher I've ever had. He was a
Oh,
really extraordinary guy. And then when we got into doing English at A level, you've got your set texts, like two or three books and plays and things that you have to study for the exams. And he used to set tests every couple of weeks on a list of books that weren't on the syllabus. And he said, "Look, part of my job is to get you to pass exams, but the other part of my job is to imbue you with a love of writing."
oh, that's epic.
Yeah. So, and in that group, in that A level English group, a lot of my close friends that I'm still friends with now all come from that group. So we went into that 2 year period was really formative for me, and he was an extraordinarily good teacher. And one of the things I always that really struck me about him, and certainly as I've got older, he had the confidence if he didn't know something to tell you, which is quite a thing to turn around to.
Yeah,
You know,
that is
some people might say
unheard
that's
of. Yeah.
absolutely, and also to listen to you. If you like, at the time, I was quite into history, and we were studying a play about the Irish Revolution, and I knew quite a lot about it. I've got an Irish family, and that's just a something. Sorry, I just got a
Oh, good.
my my computer's just making noise, even though I had put it on Do Not Disturb. Do Not Disturb. Sorry, I picked that up.
Right. Well, no sorry.
Apologies. Oh yeah, that was a rule.
Yeah.
So yeah, so he would ask me questions about that period of history, because as he said, he only had a rudimentary understanding of it or knowledge of it, and it was something I'd read around a lot of the time. So having somebody, you know, in their 40s turn around to you as a 16-year-old and respect your opinion and solicit your opinion and have you always knew with him, if he told you something, he'd have thought it through, because
Yeah.
when he didn't know something, he would say, "I'm perfectly willing to have a discussion about this, but I must say it's not my subject, and I haven't really." So he would have a debate with you as like an equal, as a teenager, and there was a really remarkable thing. And yeah, he was just an incredibly like inspirational guy and incredibly encouraging. And I wouldn't be a writer now if it wasn't for him,
Well,
definitely. And I contacted him last year because I recorded my first sitcom last year, and I invited him to come to the recording. So
oh, that's
yeah,
amazing. That would have been
yeah,
a
so
special moment.
yeah, it was really cool. And then I got the cast to sign a script for him, and yeah, so it was really nice to go out and see him and give him that.
Can you imagine? I've got a similar story, but can you imagine he goes to the recording and he's like, that was interesting. Can you imagine he didn't like it? That's my worst fear in life is uh, how,
But yeah,
yeah.
having good teachers in formative years. I think teaching is a profession that's not respected enough. But when you when you get someone in formative years who sees something in you and encourages it, you know, it's incredible.
I agree. And, you know, we always focus on the bad teachers and all that stuff. But when a teacher, as
Mm.
you said, sees you for who you are, listens to you, not only is that helping you with, you know, you valuing yourself and also ego, putting his hand up to say, look, I don't actually know. Because so
Mm.
you would have seen this, especially in comedy and maybe producers and all types of people, where we think we need to have all the answers, which is ridiculous. You know, we can put our
Mm.
hand up and say, I don't actually know, but I'm willing to learn. I really think that transforms like life. I know that's a massive statement, but you know, growing up, I
No,
think adults, yeah,
yeah, you're completely right. Somebody having the confidence to say, "I don't know," is really something, not just in comedy and things. I think it's something in 2025 is missing from a lot of
or every
discourse and dialogue.
human, yeah,
Yeah, because that thing of the art of debate and learning and things is about people with differing viewpoints or different understandings coming together to discuss things to come to a better understanding. I think
agreed.
what we've reduced it down to is a football match where everybody has to win. So you have to come to the table with everything, and that's not the point of a discussion.
I hate it. It's your side versus my side, and we all do this. We're like, well, if that person thinks this way, then they think, and then you like try and put them in a box, and someone who you might not like might have a really good idea, and we can diminish the idea as well. When
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
I think it's really important. Going back to what you said with the teacher, I had a very similar-ish. I don't have my own TV show, but I wanted to talk about do-gooders. When I went to I forgot what they're called, like a Montessori school, and I'm actually a
Yeah.
big fan of them. But I had a imposter teacher. He wasn't actually a qualified teacher, which is ridiculous. And we didn't know this. He like escaped to Italy or something, and I don't know the whole backstory there. But when I went to a mainstream school, I didn't know what division was. I hadn't learned all of these things. So when I did, the test, I failed or I did really poorly on them because imagine giving someone who's never seen maths do this equation. Like, what's an equation? You have no idea. And so I was put in earlier on in like low, what do you call those classes? Pardon me, like the special ed classes and stuff, and I didn't
Yeah.
understand why I was there. Then I met or my parents found this tutor for me, and he understood, that it wasn't actually necessarily an intelligence thing, and he could see me for who I was, and he gave me all of these extra skills and tools, and he taught me how to write, and writing was something I was scared of because I was told I was so bad at it. And long story short, he got me to excel-ish, and he embraced my writing, and now I do screenwriting. And I wouldn't do screenwriting if it wasn't for him. If he didn't see me for where I was at, instead of just saying, "Oh, this guy sucks," he really, challenged me, met me where I was, and he's like a gift from the universe or whatever you want to call it. Because if I didn't have him, I wouldn't be doing writing. And similar to what you're saying with your teacher, you credit him doing writing, which is quite remarkable. Do you
Yeah, yeah.
do you think that you wouldn't actually have done writing, or did he like light a spark? Like, how powerful do you think this encounter experience was?
Well, I'd always been told, I've always been quite sort of verbose and good with language, but not writing it down. So the kind of narrative for my entire school career was that was something I wasn't good at, and that was kind of drummed into
Yeah.
me. So
Internal or
so yeah,
external? Sorry. An internal narrative or
um,
external?
external.
Oh, okay.
So always had a kind of problem putting his ideas down on paper,
Yep.
and um, yeah, so that was the narrative for me throughout my schooling, really until that point. So those 2 years, and the last 2 years of school, were incredibly formative. So I don't know if it was always something I was interested in. I wanted to be a filmmaker and work in theatre and things like that. And I got sent to speech and drama classes when I was very young because I was quite kind of precocious at school. I think that
Mm.
was so that was something that was encouraged very early on. But the idea that then I could write and create stories and things myself, that was very much something that was formed in the last couple of years at school. Because yeah, the narrative up to that point had been different.
That's so wonderful. And I know I said this before, but I'm so glad you met him. But also like narratives as well. When you're told something from a senior person or someone that we look up to, an adult, we think, okay, they're right. I'm not a good writer. And how funny, I know you've had life experience and you've grown and you met this teacher and now you're a professional writer. Who would have thought before you met him that you would be a professional writer? Do you think you could have ever have conceived it at that point before you met him?
No, possibly not. But he taught me from the age of I think 11. So I wasn't conceiving of much.
Fair.
But I think it was that sort of idea that you could be an actor and that sort of say experience of plays and things. But the idea of actually you create the stories yourself. That was a very different thing. And it's interesting now with my daughter. So my daughter knows that Daddy writes stories. So when I'm at my desk, I write stories, and I read to her every day.
Oh,
And
nice.
she now sort of last year, actually it was just before Christmas. She's very sort of interested, well, coming up to my desk and things when I'm working, and so conceptually in terms of what I do, she knows that I perform. When she was quite young, there was an episode of Hey Dougie where I think there was a circus or a theatre episode or something, and she was asking what I do because her
Oh, cool.
mum worked for the RSPCA, so she knows that mummy helps animals. So I said, Daddy, Daddy's a clown. Daddy does that, so she knows that I go and perform in the evening. And then she knows when I'm sitting at my desk that I'm writing stories. So I'd say to her, I'm writing stories. And she came up now. She'll come and sit at my desk and she'll want to write a story. So I said, okay. So we've done a couple of times with her. We just get a blank piece of paper. And I say, okay, what's the story going to be about? And she'll sort of dictate a story to me, and I'll write it out, and then we'll read it back together. And she seems to really, yeah, she really, really likes that. But it's quite a sort of cool thing to share. So now she'll come in and I'll be working on something, and she'll be like, no, 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 we got to write one of my stories. So she'll come up and sit on my lap, and we'll...
As like, have you worked out like a profit share? Like, she gets 20% if you take all of her ideas. How does it work? Contracts, agents, man.
Well, at the moment, she's doing quite intricate narratives about. We've written a story about her pen. She's got this pen with that's got little kind of baubles and things on the top. So we've been writing about this magical pen that when you draw things with it, they come to life. So that's what we're on at the moment. But it's just for us. We haven't really explored the commercial possibilities.
Exploitation.
But if there are any children's publishers listening, we've got some banging stories about Dotty Squiggle, the magical pen. If anyone wants to,
the magical pen. I know that it's a great moment with your daughter, and I'm so happy you have that. But that is genuinely a best-selling idea for children's book. I want you to explore that. That is that, you know, that I love those type of, and I think a few people that have done children's books, and that's a great idea. I won't deter you. I won't steal this moment away from you and your daughter. The pure moment, and I'm glad that you had that. You mentioned, and I think this is really interesting, that you wanted to be a director and work in theatre and a screenwriter. And I believe you pivoted at one stage. I'd love to know from the kind of the origin. I think you did a doco on ballroom dancing. You directed hip hop. Can you tell me a bit about that?
You've done your research. Wow.
Yeah.
So that was kind of when I was at university, I spent a long time doing theatre, and then I left university, and me and some friends from our university theatre company formed a little theatre company. And
nice.
At that point I was really focused on directing, and then I made a couple of short films, and then I was trying to pursue that as a career, which is a difficult career to pursue. And I got to a point in my late 20s where I ended up doing some very odd jobs that were sort of, you know, nominally directing jobs. So I was under the impression that I had some sort of career. But yeah, I directed a documentary about ballroom dancing, which I have less than no interest in.
I thought that sounds interesting. I would have thought, okay, this is something different, or is it as
It was interesting because I was dating a ballroom dancer at the time, and those two things were completely unrelated. So I'd go to these ballroom dancing competitions with her, and no one had anything to say to me. And then I was directing this documentary about this famous ballroom dancer, and suddenly everybody wanted to talk to me.
Funny how it works.
But yeah, that was just a bit of a weird job that it never got finished, and it was it was a strange time. And around the same time, there were these group of city traders who were finding new and interesting ways to spend their bonuses, and they were self-producing hip hop albums about the financial
that is so
industry.
Bizarre,
Yeah,
but also cool.
it is bizarre.
Yeah.
I think it's somewhere in a cupboard here. I've got a copy of one of them.
Nice.
And they wanted music videos. They were self-financing these music videos. So I directed one of those. And around that time, I sort of realized that none of that was anything to do with anything that I wanted to do. And I had a bit of a breakdown about it. And then I went through a relationship breakdown at the same time. And I kind of realized I was nowhere in life. I didn't have a relationship, didn't really have a career to speak of. And I'd sort of drifted quite far from anything that I wanted to achieve. So that's when I started doing comedy. And the idea for that was Stuart Lee had written a book about stand-up, and he had been a commercial director at one point. And I think there was a line in the book that said, you know, with stand-up, it's just you and a microphone and the possibilities are endless. And I remember reading that going, I should go and try that, because the idea then was, from this sort of position of kind of utter failure, that if I could write something for myself to perform, I wouldn't have to marshal any resources. So to do film and theatre and stuff, you have to marshal resources and money, and it's quite, you know, it's an undertaking per project. So I thought if I could just write something for myself, I could go and reconnect with the idea of what an audience is. Because I do think like stand-up, theatre, film, essentially they're all uh, different toolkits for the same thing, which is kind of storytelling and entertaining
Yeah.
people. But essentially, it's about connecting with an audience. So that's what all from music, stand-up, theatre, television, they're all connected to that thing. You're looking to excite something in an audience, and it seemed like quite a cost-effective experiment that I could do to re-establish that connection. So that's how
Yeah.
it started. And
That's
then
really interesting. I got like 50,000 points. One, I'm a huge fan of the breakdown. And I know that sounds quite controversial. A breakdown for me, like I've sort of like how I see it, especially at that age of where you're at in your life, it's a moment to stir you in a different direction because things aren't working for you. It's like your compass to
mm,
go, I'm not doing the right thing. What do I need to do? And so I think
mhm.
it's actually quite brave because one, you mentioned that you're kind of disillusioned with where your career was. You could have just given up and said, fuck this, I'm gonna, I don't know, be a teacher or something else. But you're like,
Mhm.
no, I still want to do this. I'm going to make a pivot. And I think that's quite scary, especially when you've gone to uni. You've probably your identity's in this. So what actually allowed you to make that change? Because it's still scary. Going to comedy is very different still in that space as well.
I didn't find it particularly scary. It just seemed like the right thing to do. So I had a friend of mine from university, and she had been to drama school, and she wasn't kind of happy with where she was at the time, and she was looking to do some stuff. So I literally called her up, and we booked there's a small pub theatre in London called the Hen and Chickens, and we didn't know kind of how to start in comedy or what. So we just booked 2 nights at the Hen and Chickens,
Just like that.
and then we wrote an hour show. So we did
That's
sort of
crazy.
20 minutes together and then 20 minutes solo each. And it went really well. And I didn't find like the idea of doing an hour that wasn't intimidating to me because coming from the theatre side of things, that was a format I was more comfortable in. What happened to me then in the early start of my career was I actually ended up doing hour shows that went reasonably well before I kind of had a 5 minute set. And then I had to kind of go and retroactively study how to make a 5 minute set and study how to make a 10 and really dedicate myself to that because I hit a bit of a wall there of just having kind of festival shows, and that's very difficult to kind of you have to have shorter sets to
Yeah.
be commercially viable really to do it. So I kind of did everything upside down and backwards because I didn't know any other way to do it. I approached it quite naively, and it worked out. But I knew how to do shows. I knew how to structure things. I knew about beginning, middle, and end, and arcs and stuff like that. So, like my first stand-up show had a beginning, middle, and end, and a payoff. And it worked quite well as a festival show because essentially, reviewers and things like that, they're not actually that well tuned a lot of times to what they're looking at. So if you do
Yeah.
something in an environment like Edinburgh or somewhere like that, you can get away with a lot, because the structure around it was solid. So the fact that the material, you had the RSJs and everything worked. So the fact that the bricks weren't that good was something that I got away with, I'd say. And then I had to spend a few more years working on how to fashion those bricks,
That
if
is
that makes
so
sense.
wild. So sorry for interjecting, but you
Mm.
had the base from the theater, and
Yeah.
you made that pivot, but you still accumulated all of those skills. So it's not as if you just started from zero. And I like how you started, as you said, kind of topsy turvy, because that's so crazy. You just started out writing an hour, well, 20 minutes with your friend, 20 minutes for you, just like
Yeah.
that. Was that easy? You're like, well, this is what we do in theater. This is what we must do in comedy. Like writing 20 minutes, as you know, is very hard to do like that.
Yeah, we just sat down and did it. That was it was sketches and character stuff. So it wasn't quite uh, as hard as writing 20 minutes to stand up. But we just didn't know any different. So we just did it. And
Yeah.
naivety is a great engine of productivity
Yes.
because you can have if you're afraid of something, it stops you doing it. So a little knowledge of something can make you afraid of things.
I
So
agree. Yeah.
if you're completely ignorant, then you're not afraid of something, you know.
And so do you do that for a while? How long did you do the sketch for with the other lady?
About 18 months, and then I switched into doing stand up in 2012. Again, by accident, really. I was running a gig, a sketch and character night, and the person who was booked, was supposed to be emceeing it, they didn't show, so I had to MC it, and I couldn't really MC it as a sketch. I started doing it, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing about performing stand up as yourself, you don't have to carry a huge bag of props and things around, which is which
Makes it
is
easier.
useful. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. And I didn't know that last bit. And what was more exciting about solo versus the group?
Um, I think, I mean, we were going to do a festival show together, and then she couldn't, so then I just had to go solo.
Mm.
Because I was like, I got to do this, and she couldn't do it that year, and I was in a hurry. I don't remember why I was in a hurry, but I was like, I need to get something going in my life, so I just got to go and do this. So I did a kind of one man sketch show in 2011, and it was okay. It didn't really. I don't think it was. It wasn't as good as it would have been if it was the pair of us. And then it kind of developed out of there. I didn't really. I don't go through life with a lot of plans, which is probably on one level it's a kind of it's a fault, but on another level, everything that has ever good has ever happened to me is out of not
Oh,
planning.
I like
So,
that. It's such an interesting balance, and because I try and plan, and then when I don't plan, like great things happen. There's this one comedian in Australia. He said he hasn't planned a day in his life, and he's one of the most successful Australian comedians. He's been on all of our TV shows and everything. Like, how do you do that? And then there's other comedians like, I'm going to win this award. I'm going to do this. I'm going to perform 5 times a week, and it really depends on the person. So I like how you're not too critical of yourself. It would be a lot easier because there's so much you can't control, especially in comedy. I know you probably want a
mm,
TV show and you want to do this and you might plan for that,
yeah.
but do you just wake up and go, okay, going to do comedy? Are there any like other plans?
I think definitely as I've got older, I've had to plan quite a bit more for having a kid and that sort of thing. But yeah, certainly in the early stages of my career, I was like, right, I'll just do this, and then what's next? And I didn't have a 5 year plan, and I wasn't like, right, I have to get on this and have to get on that. Because it's interesting because you can have plans that don't, you can make plans that don't necessarily have anything to do with you. And what I mean with that, um, I remember a few years ago, there's a big panel show culture in the UK on TV, and at a certain stage in your comedy career, everyone's like, right, everybody wants to do panel shows.
Yeah.
So you end up having these aspirations and things that are kind of, I guess, kind of put on you
Yeah.
by outside factors. Like these are the things that would denote success. So I had this aspiration, as I think everybody did at the time, like you've got to get on panel shows. And I went out for a curry with some school friends one Christmas, and ended up going back to a friend's house, and his wife was in, and she was watching a panel show, and she wanted to keep watching the panel show rather than turn the television off and say, "Oh, you guys haven't seen each other for a while." So we just ended up in the living room watching this panel show, and two things occurred to me watching it. One, having had this aspiration for about 2 or 3 years, burning aspiration to be on this particular program, it occurred to me whilst watching it that I had never seen it before
Interesting.
because
Yeah.
I don't watch a lot of television. So I'd never seen this program. And then about 10 minutes into it, I was like, I don't think I would make a valuable contribution to this. And I just thought, well, why has it been my aspiration to be on a program that I've never watched and I've never made any kind of, rational value judgment on whether or not I would be any good on it? I would be
Yeah.
making a contribution to it. And that was really interesting. because you go through those things. There are things in my life I wanted to do, like I wanted to do a sitcom, and I wanted to make a film, and I wanted to write a play, and wanted to do a stand-up show and things like that. And those are all like long-standing aspirations. But I was never as a teenager like I want to be on X, Y, and Z program. And then I realized that my aspirations were kind of being informed a little bit by external factors rather than internal factors. And I think it's probably quite good every so often just to check yourself and make sure that your aspirations are being dictated by what it is you want to achieve as opposed to what everybody around you is doing.
Exactly. That is huge self-awareness, and especially in that, that environment you're with your friend and his wife and you're watching TV and your life kind of changes or flashes before your eyes in that sense. Like I know, like for example, with my parents, I've got two examples. For them, one of our big newspapers did a piece on me, and they're like, well, my son's successful because he's in the newspaper. And I'm like, that's your marker of success. It doesn't mean much to me. And there was another comedian I had on, and he sells out shows. He tours around the world. He is killing it. He's having a great time, but he's never been on like a Conan, for example, like you. And he thought he wasn't a successful comedian because he hadn't had, that level of, or that type of success. Then he realized, hey, whatever his markers are of success, I can tour around the world. I can sell out shows. I'm having fun. That's actually a better view of success for me, not what's dictated towards me. And so I feel like that's really profound, especially in the arts and creativity, because we think things have to be a certain way. So was it like a light bulb moment, or did it just make you, check within and be like, okay, what is actually for me and what's not actually for me?
Well, I think it was a little bit of don't get frustrated about things that have nothing to do with you, because I think you can get, there are certain opportunities around the place, and you can be like, oh, if I'm not getting that, I'm not getting that. I think you can be very guilty in the creative arts, or probably freelancing in general, of looking over other people's garden fence. And Instagram and Facebook and everything, they do kind of promote that. So we're always looking at other people and comparing ourselves to other people, whereas. And we're all guilty of that, and it drives you mad, you know.
Definitely.
And I think that's not a particularly profound statement. You can kind of look at the general tone in the world and say that constantly looking at everybody else's opinions and achievements and everything on a little device that you keep in your pocket is not doing anyone any good.
I agree. And it's also, we don't realize how much like everyone has that awareness, but that we don't have the awareness to higher levels of how much is it actually impacting us. What is it actually doing to our psyche when that's all you see? It's a really important point. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, and you got to work out what it is you want and where you are in life, and you have to judge your successes, I think, and your failures by, or try to, by your own metrics. Not completely, but like be happy with what you've got. I could sit here for an hour and tell you about all of the things I'm frustrated that I don't have. And that's a completely unproductive thing. Or I could sit here and be like, right, okay, this is what I do have.
Yeah,
Somebody said to a good friend of mine who's also a comedian, a few years into her career, they said there's a certain point where you're constantly looking at the people ahead of you going, I want that, and I want that, and I want that. But every so often, for your own mental health and sense of achievement and momentum, you have to stand where you are and look behind you at all of the people who are looking at you and going, I want that. And you have to be kind of grateful for where you are, because other people.
I agree. I think
you're one of the people ahead for other people, and that's quite a healthy thing to do.
Very much so, and especially as you mentioned with competition and stuff like that. Not every year is going to be upwards, or maybe there's like dips or whatever. And to go back and maybe reflect, 3 years ago you would have killed to get that special, that comedy special that's out, or sell out those shows in Edinburgh. That's really. Are you good? Are you good with that? Are you able to go back?
Oh no, look, I'm as guilty of it as the next person. I mean, last year I had a situation where I'd worked for 8 years to get my own sitcom, and that was something that I wanted since I was probably about 11 years old, 11 or 12 years old. And then at the age of 40 I got to do that, and I got to do six episodes of a sitcom with an incredible cast, and it came out. It was really well received, and that was like a life's ambition.
Oh, nice. That's so
And at this,
awesome.
yeah, it was great. And then at the same time, I was doing a stand-up show that was, or just after that, I was doing a stand-up show that was quite different to anything I'd done before. And if I'm honest, like it needed a bit more cooking.
Yep.
I did that, and that was not as successful critically as the last four shows that I'd done. And then I took it out on tour, and that tour was not as successful as my last tour.
Based on what metrics in terms of selling tickets or how you felt about it, laughs?
Reviews, numbers, how I felt about it, like all of that stuff. And I was sort of guilty of looking at that, going, "Oh God, this is such a failure." In the same year where I'd done something that,
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
yeah, that I'd wanted to do my entire life and everything, and I did get to a point where I allowed the one thing to overshadow the other, which is a stupid thing to do. And also, I shouldn't have been doing a stand-up show on a tour last year because I was writing a sitcom, and that was quite a lot of work.
Yeah. I don't know how you did both. Yeah.
Yeah. So this year I'm doing the second series of that this year, and I'm not doing a stand-up show. I'm going to do a stand-up show in 2026 because I just overloaded my plate somewhat, and something got to give at that point. And the thing that gave, I think, was the stand-up show, and I was juggling those things with being a parent and changing life circumstances and all sorts of things. And I just put too much on my plate. And I did have a couple of moments of thinking, oh God, this has been such a failure. I've dropped my batting average or whatever. And I had to kind of work to have a word with myself and go, oh, it's been a fantastic year. Like it's been a really great year. But it's that thing of I remember someone saying, people have this ability mentally to go to the park and put their picnic blanket next to the only piece of dog shit they can find. There's there's no need to do that.
Uh, that is, I love your self awareness. It's so unique because you've got this amazing milestone, and we'll talk about do gooders because I'm so proud of you. That's my life dream is to get a sitcom. I've written so much. And then you're also somehow balancing comedy. And I'm sure it was still of a very high standard. It may have not been it wouldn't have been at the standard that you may be used to in the last 4 years, but I'm sure 4 years before that or 5 years before that, you would have been really proud of it. And then balancing all of that, because mentally all of your time and energy are going into these things, but to take that moment to go, I actually have achieved something so amazing. Although this hasn't gone quite to where I want to, I'm going to enjoy and just, and then you made a change. And that change was, I'm not going to do the stand-up show because I'm going to focus on this. And that's really good because it keeps you fresh. And you made that decision because you had that other experience. There's so much there. I threw a lot at you. But I think that's so awesome that you had the reflection, but then you're like, I really want to do this sitcom. I'm going to take a little bit of a break in that regard and focus on this because I can come back to stand-up. Was that, the thinking?
Yeah, well, I'm not a great multitasker. I think you have to kind of get, as you go on in life, kind of work out what your strengths and weaknesses are. And creatively, I can only do one thing at a time. I can't write a sitcom in the morning and write stand up in the evening. And
Yeah,
that's
that's
I
hard.
just I can't. Yeah, I can't do it. And I have to kind of give myself to one thing. And there are people who can do that, and hats off to them. And I think that's great. But I have to be aware that I'm not one of those people.
And that's really important as well because, and also from a burnout perspective as well, if you were to do both things as well, then perhaps both will be diminished, and then you might not enjoy it as much. And by focusing potentially on the one thing, especially for you, that'll work out better as well. It obviously is. Now we've got a season two, and it's very
Yeah,
exciting.
I mean, I definitely got last year to the point of burnout. I really was burnt out last year, and I think you have to kind of listen to yourself at a certain point and just go, you need to, you need to be able to step away. There's only so much you can do.
I agree. And also with your ability and how long you've been doing it with, it's not something where, you could say goodbye, but you're not actually saying goodbye to it. You could probably just get back into it very quickly. Whereas,
Yeah, I mean, I've kept doing club stuff and bits and bobs. I'm still performing stand up,
yep,
but in terms of that kind of undertaking of
new show.
doing a new show. Also, I just wanted something to percolate a little longer. I had I had an experience of the show that I did during COVID. Very unusually, that ended up being 3 years because of COVID. The first performance of that was February of 2020 at the Leicester Comedy Festival, and then by the time we filmed that for a special it was 3 years later. And then the next show that I did through a series of circumstances ended up being done in 6 weeks.
Was this Sunflower?
No, Sunflower was before that. That was just trying to help, and then
Oh yeah.
never
Yeah.
had never had it so good. So never had it so good was about my my next breakdown. So I had a breakdown in my late 20s, and I had a breakdown in my 30s.
I told you I'm a big
So,
fan of the breakdown. I think it's
yeah,
very
yeah, no,
important.
it's
Yeah.
good. So yeah, I ended up like I quit drinking and I lost 5.5 stone, and I had
Oh,
some
good.
I had some health problems and some addiction issues and things after the lockdown period, and I had to sort that out. And then I ended up doing a show about that in quite short order. But the show that I did was about it was booked into the Edinburgh Festival, so it was about the Edinburgh Festival. So it ended up being quite a site specific thing, and it was about what is it about the relationship between the performer and the audience, specifically in Edinburgh. Why do audience members come there, and why do performers do it? So so those two shows were kind of radically different in their gestation periods, and that went quite like both of those went quite well. But then that show, because it was site specific, I didn't tour it or didn't do anything with it. And then I was working on the radio series. And then the next show that I was doing was about the space race, which is something I know quite a lot about. And I had something I wanted to do there. But I mean, from finishing the radio series to, I think I ended up with like 5 weeks to do that show in the end, to put it together. And it just wasn't enough time. I didn't leave myself enough wiggle room. So I looked at the next show and I was like, I want at least, because it's not like sitting down and writing constantly.
No.
It's more like having the ideas, writing them down, allowing them to percolate, allowing them to soak, and
And also trial and
yeah,
error. I would assume you're
yeah,
going up on
huge
stage
amount
and
of trial and yeah, trial and error, very big element of it, and yeah, so I just decided the next stand-up show I want to do, I want to let it percolate a little bit longer, because I wasn't comfortable doing the space show at any point during it, because I just hadn't had any decompression, and I think there were things about that show I really liked, and the things about it that were really good. But my relationship with that show, my relationship with the material wasn't what I wanted it to be, because I just hadn't allowed myself that space. So so I was like, right, I'm not doing that again. I'm not crowding in projects together where I won't have the space to develop that relationship with the material that I feel good about.
I think that's really important, and it's in all areas of life. Like I used to be an accountant. I'm just throwing a bullshit example. If I had a report and I just did it straight away, you need the ideas to percolate. From a screenwriting perspective, I could write 80% of a screenplay in 2 days, and I've done that a few times. But then that last 20% could take 2 years of me trying to fine tune ideas. I'm getting ideas on my walk. It just can't be done in like day, or at least for me, day one. I need to explore the ideas in my head, see how it unravels. And it's very hard to explain. Like I try and explain it to my parents. They're like, oh, how come you haven't finished the screenplay? I'm like, doesn't quite work like that. I need it out there. I need it to breathe. I need to see it dancing. And it's
Yeah.
really important because especially with stand up, you mentioned, I think 6 weeks and 5 weeks to do a show. Like that's also really unheard of. And I'm getting the
Mm.
order mixed up to do five weeks and you did a successful show as well. That blows my mind. I don't know how you did that as well.
Well, the 6 week one was that was a really successful show,
Oh,
and I
okay.
think that
Yeah,
probably gave me a false read that
yeah.
I could do the other one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had something that I wanted to say with that one, and I was quite clear about what I wanted to say, and that was, I guess, the ideas and everything about that. I've been doing the festival since I was 19, so I had a few things.
Wow.
You know, you could say that those ideas had percolated for a while. and I didn't have anything else to think about other than that. Whereas for the show that I did after that, I had loads of things to think about.
Mm.
So yeah, you got to watch it. You got to kind of know your limits, I think.
And from a big hot topic of the breakdown, you mentioned that you had a few things that you needed to work on and addictions. I
Mm.
believe you quit smoking as well. How
Hmm.
does it feel? I know in the moment, super stressful. I won't get you to relive it, but obviously a lot of stuff going on. COVID, very stressful. We won't talk about COVID. It's
Yeah.
pretty, I still think, courageous to look, and you've done this heaps in your life, to look deep within and go, something's not working as well. Why did you decide
Mm.
to actually make the change? And how do you feel, for example, after like quitting smoking and things like that?
Um, well, I think for we're going to have to talk about COVID a little bit with this, but I'm not by any means unique in this. I think a lot of people's relationship with drinking and stuff was radically
Heightened.
changed by
Yeah.
by sitting around during the day because I had a point at the beginning of COVID, my career was going really well, and it was a long a lot of stuff that I worked for was ships seemed to be coming in,
Yeah.
and then in one morning that all got taken away. And again, I am not unique
Yeah. But for you,
in that
that's
sense.
sorry, for the individual, that is on a level of stress that is very difficult to convey, regardless
Yeah,
if
very
everyone
much.
else experienced it. It's still our personal journey, so we'll just focus on that, so no one can get to think.
Indeed, yeah. So I just the with the drinking and stuff, the boulder kind of ran down the hill really. And then when COVID finished, I didn't stop. I
Yep.
didn't stop drinking. I got myself into a very bad state, and I was like nearly 20 stone, and I had liver problems and kidney problems, and was very, very depressed and sort of mentally not in a good place, and something had to give, and for that was right. I have to sort this out. I have to stop it. I have to kind of realize that I have a very destructive relationship with this,
Yep.
and I'm gonna have to get help and sort it out. So I did that.
Thank you for sharing
Um,
that. And we've spoken a lot about this on the podcast as well. And also another credit to you, once again, looking internally and making a change. We sweep things under the rug so much. I know you said that it got a bit worse, but we sweep
mm,
so many things under the rug, and to still, address it. You could just ignore it. There's, your life wouldn't have looked as good, but you could have just ignored it and you actually made that change. I think that's something to be celebrated. Did you do, and if you don't want to talk about it, it's fine. Did you do like
mhm.
an AA program or anything like that?
Yeah, I did a rehab program. Yeah, and that's something that I have to continue. That's something I have to keep checking in with to keep those things in uh, to keep those things at bay. Yeah.
And last one on that, I'll focus on.
Hmm.
I really enjoy this, so I think this is really
Sure.
inspiring. Quite a few people have spoke about their relationship, whether it's the AA program or doing some other thing, and they've spoken about the self awareness that they've gained, and meeting
Hmm.
certain people, and how that's actually been quite interesting to explore their relationship, not only with the substance, but to look back within and go, oh, okay, I need to work on that, or I've made certain changes here, and they look back with fondness because it's given them something within, like this power. Have you had any like profound moments like looking back?
Well, it's been interesting because I was my performance style and what I did and everything was actually quite sort of tied up with the fact that I was a very big, bulking guy, and I used to drink on stage, and I ended up in a position where I didn't read to an audience how I read in my head. So when I lost a lot of weight and I stopped drinking things, I wasn't this big kind of hulking, sweating guy, and I didn't know that anymore. It was actually a director that I worked with said to me, I came off after a preview, and he was like, "You don't read to an audience how you think you read in your head," because it was quite sort of a
Interesting.
rapid. I lost 5.5 stone in 4 months.
I don't know what stone is, but continue and I will quickly find it out.
Really work out. It's a lot. So it's a quarter of my body weight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Also, I got to a point with new material and things where I drink a pint before going on stage, talk about bad relationship with these things, and I had it in my mind I can't do this without that. So
Yeah.
I had to kind of learn how to perform again. I had to learn how to
Oh.
develop material because that there's a certain amount of I don't know fear or whatever, like switching that thing off in your brain is found. There's a certain thing with like bowling and darts and pool where you're better at them when you've had three-quarters of a pint.
Yeah.
Then it all falls to pieces.
Yeah.
But there's just something about switching off this kind of negative thing in your head to push on through. So I had to kind of learn how to do that again because I had a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol for a very long time. Looking back, so it was built into my personality. It was built into how I saw myself. It was built into how I worked. So you then have to kind of look at that and retool a lot. But one of the things that addiction counseling has done for me is, I mean, just before we recorded this podcast, I sat down this morning. I journal every morning, and
Oh, cool.
I write gratitude lists.
I love those.
Yeah, so you sit down and you go, okay, rather than focusing on the negative, and I can be quite a negative person, and I think that thing we sort of touched on earlier,
Yeah.
looking at not looking at what you've got, not looking at what you want to achieve or have achieved or whatever, and looking at other people as a metric for your sense of self is a very unhealthy way to go about things. So actually, just having that thing of just writing a list of stuff every morning. Somebody said to me, I don't know why this stuff works, but it does work, and I would firmly put myself in that camp. But yeah, journaling in the morning of just getting stuff out of your head down onto a page or a couple of pages, and then and writing out a gratitude list is a really good way to start the day. And also, I don't know if you know about morning pages. Have you done that? It's from this book called The Artist's Way.
Oh,
Which is quite
okay. Thank you for bringing that up. You're the third person to bring it up to me in a week. I just bought the book, but I haven't read. I haven't
right.
started.
Okay.
Yeah, that means I'm
So the
going to
thing
do
about
it.
as a writer doing morning pages, you sit and do 3 sides of A4 every morning just get yourself warmed up,
Yeah.
and I do that in a form of journaling,
Cool.
and it's really good. Just getting the mind going. It's a very very good way to start the day as a writer to
Even just
journal and do more.
personally as well. Like, obviously, most things I do is in the guise of writing, but from like a mental health perspective, I think it's critical because you're letting your emotions on that paper. They can be angry, they can be nice, whatever you want it to be, and you're releasing. It's a massive form, and I lean more into that area as well. But especially if I'm writing angry, sometimes I find when I write on that piece of paper, oh fuck this, fuck that, and I'm actually writing down exactly how I feel. It is so cathartic. I
Yeah,
I don't do it enough, but I do the gratitude. And I think I don't have the scientific terms to explain it. But when you genuinely come from gratitude, not just saying, I'm grateful that I have this podcast, but when you can actually feel it and you write it down,
yeah.
and sometimes it's faking it till you make it, it does something to your brain. You definitely see the world in a different way. It's a superpower that I highly recommend and have had profound benefits from as well.
Yeah, it's really good. I had a friend of mine who's not with addiction, but they're going through a bit of a hard time at the moment, and I recommended it to them, and they came back and said, "Oh, you're like the fourth person this week to recommend doing that." I was like, "Yeah, there's just something.
Yeah.
There's something about lots of things that can swirl around in your head. If you can get them out of your head onto a page, then they're not
I agree,
living rent
especially
free in
like
your head."
from an overthinking perspective. Like if I keep on saying the same thought more than one or two times, sorry, more than two or three times, like,
Yeah,
this isn't helping me. I'm in a loop. How do I change the loop? People can do physical exercise, they can go for walks, but sometimes on the walks you can still have that thing. So I need to release it. And that is one method that I have is to just release it and get it out there. I've written what I need. Nothing else can change. I keep on playing these what if scenarios. They're not going to happen. It's on the page. And then sometimes I might do a ritual. I'll burn it or something. I'll just rip it up. But it's a free tool that everyone has. We don't need and which I do encourage. You don't need to go necessarily see someone because there's an issue. You can deal with the issue in that moment and also see someone, to empower
yeah,
us, if that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. There are lots of little things you can do as you say, yeah, just yourself. The pen, like the other thing, like meditation. I got into meditation, and before I go on stage, um, trying to get in that headspace that I erroneously thought that a pint would get me in.
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting.
just doing that with a bit of meditation. Um, it's yeah, it really helps. But you come up, you tell yourself these nonsense things like, oh, I can only do this with drinking, or drinking is
Yeah.
part of who I am, or whatever, and it's complete load of shit. Um,
And how do you think you do become a habit, or it's like, oh, this is, numbing me to some sense. Like I do this with sugar. This is definitely an addiction that I need to work on. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with what sugar can do, and it can fry your brain. It can numb you, when you can numb your emotions as well. Even not
mhm,
that I'm getting up on stage, but maybe it can calm down the nerves as well.
mhm.
Was that just a way that you, like when you found the drinking, for example, you're like, oh, this is doing something for me, and then the pattern just kind of happened? Like, was it a conscious choice? Or because like with drinking,
I,
with
I
comedy,
don't think
there's
it
always
was
drinking.
I don't think it was a conscious choice, but it was
Yeah.
but it was something I definitely leaned on for a long time.
Yeah.
In all sorts of ways, not just with creativity or being on stage or that sort of thing. Social situations. I'm not a massive fan of social situations. I'm not the most comfortable person in it.
Oh, I'm surprised to hear that.
Yeah. um, but you could have a pint and then be fine. Whereas now it's just going, oh, it's okay if you don't like to be in groups of people.
I think that's important because, I don't drink anymore. I didn't have
Yeah,
quite that. I just realized I was drinking for the wrong reasons. Like, I never liked drinking, so why am I doing this? And then I
yeah,
discovered a lot. I won't bore you with the whole thing, but also from like a social perspective, I used to have so many friends, and I thought every day I have to see someone and do this. Now I'd much rather be a hermit and just see the people that light me up in a sense, and that's not many people. So I went from a
yeah.
friendship group from literally over 50 people to now maybe it's 4 or 5 or 6, whatever the number is, and we're told, and it sounds like you become more introverted in the sense as well because you're probably doing more things for yourself and you realize what's draining your energy, whereas you may have not. Well, I'm projecting. You may have not had that awareness before. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you for bringing that all up. I love talking about this stuff, the meditation, the gratitude, just the things that we learn along the way, because I believe it makes us much stronger.
Mhm.
It empowers people. And also just bringing what you've spoken about. A lot of guests have talked about shame. And I think this removes shame, and everyone has addictions to some degree. And it's very important.
Mhm.
It changes the conversation and also the negative talk we have. So much appreciated. Now I want to finish the bit about do-gooders because, as I
Oh
said, I
yeah.
do screenwriting. Very long story short, I had a TV deal in America. I was going to go to America. I was projecting. I'm getting Netflix, the whole works. I thought my life was set, and well, not set, but I was really excited. And you mentioned you had the dream since you're 8 years old, and then I forget how many years you said you put into this screenplay, but
From pitching it initially to it being broadcast was 8 years.
wow. Can you tell me a bit about the speed bumps there? Because people think you just have a great script and it gets sold, and it does happen for 1% of people, but it can be brutal. The meetings, the yeses, the nos. You think it's going to happen, it doesn't happen, and then there's bad communication and all of that. Can you give me a bit of a summary of the road bumps?
Yeah, so I pitched it to a production company back in 2015, something like that, and it got optioned straight away, and then worked on it there, developed it with that production company for a couple of years, and then it got commissioned as a pilot for an online but quite a big sort of online company, and it was one of like 8 pilots that they made. And it had a phenomenal cast, and I was like, here we go, this is great. There's sorts of interesting things that happened with that. I was supposed to get paid a certain amount of money, and then like the 2 days before, they slashed the money down to basically nothing, and were like,
Oh, unfortunately, that's so common, but that sucks.
yeah, and they were like, well, it's a great opportunity for you. So, yeah.
The
I'm like,
gaslighting. Oh,
yeah, yeah, the gaslighting, and you go, okay. So then we went and did it, and we made it, and I was pleased with it, and then and then they shelved it. They didn't do anything with it because I don't know, somebody who'd been involved in commissioning it then moved on to another place and da da da, and the person who comes in doesn't want to put out, you know, yada yada yada. Um, so
That's
then,
still brutal. Sorry, I'm going to harp on a few
it was
points.
yeah
That's
yeah it
also a
was
big red flag because this is also you're speaking to this is my life dream, so I'm projecting myself onto you. And then
yeah
just that conversation, you're agreeing, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna cut your fee," and you're like, "Hmm." You're probably furious at the moment, but you're also like, "Well, I'm going to get a TV show, so I got to do it." But that is like such a, and you don't realize how big of a red flag. I had a very similar experience as well, and yeah,
yeah.
was it just like, okay, I guess
Well,
I want to get
look,
this
if
made.
you yeah you want to get it made, so you just go yes, and you kind of have to. If you're not in a position to not take it, you got to take it. So then we made it, and you're like standing in the room watching these incredible people record it, and you're like, okay, great, we're made. And then it doesn't go out, and you're like, oh, God's sake.
Yeah.
So that was the first couple of years of it, and then it was sort of iced, and I think various people had an option on it, like the basic concept of it, and then all those options expired, and then I had a list of projects, and it was on the list of projects when I was talking to another production company, and they were like, this one, we really like this one," and I was like, "Yeah, that is a good idea." And really, what happened then was they optioned it, and then during lockdown, I had a really good experience in that because nothing was being made, I got to work with a couple of really incredible producers developing it
Cool.
on Zoom. So it got developed during lockdown, and then I wrote I basically completely retooled it, just kept the basic idea, but then completely rewrote it, completely retooled it, kind of reconceptualized it during that period, and then wrote a pilot, which everyone seemed to like, and then pitched it around the place, and then it got Radio 4, which is a big thing in the UK. It's a big thing in the UK. It's
Big
one
thing
of
in the
the.
world.
Is it okay? Good.
Yeah.
But Radio 4 had been when I was a kid. I used to listen to Radio 4 comedy all the time. There were loads of Radio 4 comedy cassettes. So it's actually, funnily enough, that was my aspiration to have a Radio 4 comedy show,
Oh,
long before an aspiration to have a television series. So we pitched it, and then Radio 4 seemed quite keen, and then you went through the whole thing, and I was expecting maybe we'd get a pilot, or they do like 15-minute episodes of stuff. We might get two 15 minutes or four 15 minutes, and then they came through to straight off the pilot and commissioned 6 half hours,
wow.
which I really grew up in 6 half-hour culture. That was always the kind of
Yeah.
thing for me, but that was very very rare for that kind of thing to happen now, particularly for me as a first time thing, and that was 2 years ago now, coming up to 3 years ago now. And then from that, basically had a year to write it, and then we recorded it last May, June, and then it went out in August, and
That
then
is,
it got recommissioned again
and
in
you're getting a
October.
season 2, right?
Yeah,
Well, okay. Thank you for that. That is crazy. And the writer in me would be so scared. You sell it, and then they're like, okay, let's make it, and then it gets shelved. That's my
yeah,
biggest fear in life is knowing that it's like there, but I can't even get it. It's out of my grasp. Were
yeah,
you worried at the time? Like, well, that's the industry. Like, how do you kind of move on from that? Because the options are probably a few years to get it
yeah.
back.
So, well, I was doing stand up, and I was doing various other bits and bobs, and developing things. I was really upset about it, but it didn't sort of stop me, and I kind of had a certain amount of faith that it would get made at some point because I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
But I'm quite, I don't know, like tenacious is the wrong word, but I didn't give up on it. I carried on talking about it, and pitching it to people, and stuff, and I was fairly confident that it would at some stage get made, and it did, and it got made in a way that was the version that went out last summer is much better than the version that was recorded in 2015. Much better, and I'm a much better writer than I was in 2015. So I
Nice.
think whatever happened between those two things, it all happened for a reason, and I was able then to deliver something in 2024 that was of a standard that was just much higher than I would have been able to deliver.
That's a
You know,
great perspective because in the moment you would have thought, oh, I've written a masterpiece. And then with
yeah,
time reflection, working on it, letting it brew in your brain. And then you're like, you know what? Although you may have not loved all the ups and all the downs, it's a really
yeah,
good
it came
product.
good it came good in the end, and it speaks to the final product. And also, look, anything worth doing is going to be difficult to do. I think there's a like we all want to get a TV series, and we all want to get a radio series, and all want to get a stand-up special, or we want to get on this program or that program. And the reality of the situation is there aren't a huge number of those opportunities knocking around. So I don't actually think that 8 years was was a long time, really. I'd rather it took 8 years and turned out how it did than I got it in a year and it turned out,
You're speaking
not
to my
not
soul. The writer in me needs to hear this, and I'm sure there's many people as well. Because, 8 years on paper, but as you said, you're getting a good, high quality product, and that's what you're here to do.
look. It's very easy for me to sit here and say everything happens for a reason when the thing for me worked out. I mean, there's a lot of those, you know, you see on Instagram like aspirational things that go, Bill Gates says this, and you're like, yeah, well, it's fine for Bill Gates to say
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So I am coming from my sanguine view on the 8 years it took is coming from a position of privilege in that I got the thing made. But it's difficult to get things made, and I think you have to give yourself a little bit of a let
I
sometimes.
would challenge you on that. I still think because you dreamed in it and you believed in it, that's what helped carry it. You didn't
Hmm.
have any, it was just purely from, good intentions of getting it made. So there's more to it than that. And talking about things getting made as well, you have a hilarious comedy special out, and I'm sure you've got so many compliments. I hopefully am giving you a different type of compliment. You have
Okay.
it was very funny. You have a very unique way of holding a microphone. Has anyone ever told you that? I've watched a lot of comedy. This one made me laugh heaps, but the way that you held the microphone, that was like a pro's pro. Tell me about it.
Well, I'm very loud, and the room that we recorded in, and yeah, it's been commented upon in
Oh,
numerous reviews.
how you hold the
Um,
mic.
yeah,
Oh, I thought it was unique. Oh, damn.
I hold it like a pair of chopsticks, but down by my chest. Um, Hey, look, an SM58 is a powerful tool. I like you. It's the instrument you use. So in a room like that, I don't need a microphone. I can fill that room, no problem. But you can do things vocally with a microphone. So you can use that. You can come in for quiet bits. You can emphasize points and whatever. So I kind of use it like that. I use it for vocal inflection and stylistically. But yeah, there's nothing about that size of room or that number of people because I think it's like 200 people
Oh,
in
you
a
can
in a
do
low
that with,
in a
yeah.
in a low ceiling room. I often get mistaken for an actor. I think when I started stand up, lots of people were saying that I was a classically trained actor, and I'm not.
Oh, nice.
Um, but I am very loud. I can be very loud. Um, so yeah, I use it for effect essentially.
That's very funny. And how does it
And also, I don't
feel?
want to blow
I don't
people's
know.
heads off. If I go like full bore with the microphone like that, it'll peak the system and hurt people's ears and stuff. So I have to. I do say to technicians who I've not worked with before, I said just don't ride the fader because I have particularly early in my career, there are people kind of when I was moving it away, they're like riding the fader, and you go, don't.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing, and I'm doing it for a reason. So don't. If you try and compensate for something, you're gonna muck this up. But I know what I'm playing with.
That's experience. And how does it feel, talking about gratitude as well, to have a comedy special at this standard? How do you feel about it? High standard.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I love £800 Gorilla. Awesome company. They put out two of my stand-up shows as albums before. So this is the first one I've filmed with them. And it was really cool to get to do it because that's the show that took the COVID period. So that show, I have a very interesting sort of relationship with that show because I started writing it pre-COVID. and then came back to it at various points when we were allowed out of our houses and all that sort of stuff. But from the point of the first performance of that show to the last performance of that show, that encompasses a huge amount of my life. Becoming a father for the first time, like getting sober, doing all these things. So that show, it's interesting. In the middle, in the original run of that show, I was like 19 and a half stone. And I would end the show by downing a pint of beer at a certain point. So the filmed version of that show, it's kind of different. I'm there in a suit and
That's really cool to see that arc, the change as well
yeah,
that you've been. Yeah.
yeah. And it was posted. So getting to film it post the tour and to get it to film it in the Monkey Barrel in Edinburgh, which is where the show started, and to get it to film it with 800 Pound Gorilla and it to be a document that it's really cool.
Yeah, and it's done really well. What level of, we'll put in the episode notes below so people can check it out. I highly
Thanks, man.
recommend it. What's the sense of pride? I know that you're a modest guy. Do you still look back at that and go like, that is so cool? Like not only the journey, the arc, the high quality jokes, but just to look back and go, I produced that. Like that's not an easy thing to do.
I think one of the things that I'm most proud of the show is I wrote it. It's that it's matured somewhat. There are bits of it that I think now are more relevant in 2025 than they were when I wrote it in 2020. So the religion stuff and the stuff about straight white male billionaires and things like that, and the way people fight and that kind of that analysis of online discourse and the position that religion holds in society and things like that as kind of quite sort of silly out there ideas that I was jotting down in 2020. They're more relevant now in 2025 with the state of the world and how everyone's interacting. I'm really proud of that.
You're Nostradamus, I believe it also said in the thing as well. Yeah.
I think that was a PR said that, but yeah.
Yeah, you'll take it. What a high
Yeah,
compliment.
sure.
Oh, actually, before we do a rapid fire segment, I'll try and make this as quick as possible. You mentioned that when you lost all the weight and how you saw yourself was very different to how the audience saw you. I had one guest, Gary Anthony Williams. He's been on Malcolm in the Middle and Whose Line Is It Anyway? He would have lost, I don't remember, people can look it up, 100 kilos. And so as an actor, people were still getting him in for those roles. And he's like, well, I've changed. I'm no longer suitable for the previous roles. And that was a bit of a journey trying to, get the casting directors and everyone on board. Like, I'm still the same person, but you're perceiving me in a different way. Was that a hard adjustment to make mentally when you're saying the crowd sees you potentially in a different way?
Yeah, I think just in terms of how, I mean, in the special, there's a good example of that. Like, there's a bit in the special where I'm climbing on barrels and hanging off the girders on the ceiling, and kind of imposing myself on the audience in a quite a theatrical way.
Yeah.
Which when I was kind of bigger and sweating and hulking stuff, I didn't really need to do that. I was pretty imposing from where I was. I didn't need to go and stand above the audience to make that point. So I guess that's kind of an adjustment. But yeah, I just had to remember certain jokes wouldn't land. I had this thing about getting gout, and there was just a line of saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, do not go up to somebody who looks like me in a gym and try and make friends. We're not there to make friends. We're there because it's a medical emergency." Well, I'd actually gone through the period of it being a medical emergency, and I didn't look like somebody anymore who was in the gym for a medical emergency. So you got kind of bin that material.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess the way you see yourself is always different to the way others see you, and I guess as a performer, you have to be slightly more like aware of that. But you're still not going to get it right. There's that great phase of like what other people think of you is none of your business. So,
But for a comedian, it kind of is as well.
yeah, 100%. But yeah, just in terms of like the way you translate or self-deprecating jokes you're making about yourself. You can't make self-deprecating jokes about being enormously fat if you're not enormously fat, and it took me a while to sort of catch up with that. Just looked like it was being mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I never thought about it like that. Interesting. Let's do the rapid fire segment to wrap up. And
Okay.
Do-gooders, just for context for everyone, I believe that's got they work in a charity as well. And I believe you did a
Yep.
PR stunt and you raised over $10,000. Can you tell me about that?
Oh yeah, so that was for a show I did called Smile, where I was talking about I was talking about people caring about everything in that show. You know, this idea that everyone's like, oh, you've got to care about everything, and I just said you've got to specialize. And I said in the show that the thing I don't care about climate change, just as a joke, and I was like, if you care about that, fine. It's just not, it just doesn't do anything for me. But I care about homelessness. So I mentioned that in the show as a joke in the middle, just about just looking at big topics, and it was based on something a teacher had said to me when I was at school, where I was getting very upset about the issue of fox hunting, which at the time in the late '90s was a big press topic in the UK, and my teacher said, "Oh, I don't care about that," and I got really offended and said, "What do you mean you don't care?" And he said, "Well, caring about things is like fancying people. You can't fancy everyone. Like that would be insane. Your life would be awful." But sometimes you'll meet a person and there'll be an attraction, and that means you fancy someone. He said, well, caring about things is the same thing. Sometimes someone will put all of the information down on a topic, and you'll consume it all, and you'll have no reaction to it. You'll have no emotional reaction to it, and that means that you don't care. And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't make you a bad person, because you'll find something that you will care about, and you can go and get excited about that. But if you go around trying to care about everything, you'll make yourself ill. So that was the bit in the middle of the show. And in the lead up to doing that show, I'd worked in the venue before, and they have a thing where people will buy a ticket, but then a certain percentage of the people can come in for free just off the street, and then you get a bucket, and the people who came in for free can put money in the bucket. And I'd done a show the year before, and that show had been about something that had happened to me and my ex-wife, and like a very personal thing. And I said at the show I'd like to take my wife on holiday, and so that's what the money's for. So people would put money in the bucket, and people were being really generous. And the venue kept coming down saying, "Oh, you're breaking the takings record in the bucket." And I was like, "Oh, this is great." And then at the end of the show, I didn't get any of that money. That money went to other people, and I just got emails telling me why that money wasn't mine. And I was like, "Well, those are my tips, right? Those are my tips." And they're like, "No, no, no, no. We've decided they're not your tips. They go into this pot." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that, and the people giving money in the bucket didn't know that, so I didn't get to take her on holiday." And I got really upset about that. And I found out about that just before Smile was going to go on in the same venue, and I couldn't change venue, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I was really upset about that. And I went for a walk, and then I came up with this idea, and I was like, okay, I have to stand at the back of the room with a bucket. That's in the contract. But if I invite somebody down from a charity that I care about, and I was like, I'd already mentioned that I care about the homelessness thing in the show, and I was like, cool, okay, so what I'll do, I'll get a homelessness charity to come and stand next to me, and I'll just tell the audience not to put money in my bucket, to put it in that bucket. And that will raise a load of money for the homeless, and it will also help me make my point about getting my tips nicked. And so I didn't tell anyone that I was going to do it until like the day before, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, you can't do that." And I was like, "But I can do that." And they said, "Okay, well, great. Well, we're going to do some PR about it. We're gonna get the press down and tell everyone that you're doing it." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no," because that sort of negates the point of doing it. I'm not doing it for people to go, "Hey, isn't that great?" And they said, "Well, what if we stop you?" And I was like, "Well, if you stop me, then I'll get press down." And they're
Ah,
like,
smart. Yeah.
so they said, "Okay, well, you thought about this?" And I was like, "I've thought about it from every conceivable angle, and there's not really anything you can do, because basically, if I'm not getting that money, then I'd rather it went to something I cared about." So it was a little protest stunt, and it worked out really well. And so yeah, we did over the course of the show. People kind of liked the, I think they liked the protest element of it, and I do think, for something like Edinburgh, it's the world's largest party, and I said to the audience, like, we're having the world's largest party in these people's homes, and we haven't invited them to it. And it fit kind of as an idea, it fit with everything that I'd been saying in the show, and so the audience reacted really well to it, and they put a phenomenal amount of money in that
That's
bucket.
so cool. And I like how
So
you know, thought about everything and you went like, fuck you to the venue in your own way and it worked out for you and worked out for,
yeah,
yeah.
it was a really good tantrum because essentially it was a little tantrum that I had about the injustice I felt about the situation the year before, and then I was able to channel that into something that really worked for the point I was making in the show, and really did some good for some people who needed it. So it was
Amazing.
kind of yeah, it was like a 360 thing, that all the stars aligned, in that. Yeah.
Good for you. What would you do if you knew you could not fail?
What would I do if I knew I could not fail? Learn an instrument.
Have you ever played one before?
Yeah, but I failed.
As in you gave up or you weren't good or you,
Yeah, I won't get. I'm not naturally a gift. I've actually got a guitar hanging on my wall. I bought a guitar because I was like, it'd be good to have a hobby that's nothing to do with comedy,
yeah.
and I have no aptitude for it whatsoever, and my lack of any aptitude of it I find frustrating. So it's um yeah, it's not done its job as a hobby. But yeah, I think I'd like if I wasn't going to fail, I'd learn an instrument because I think that would be a good thing to be
I'm
able
not
to
going
do.
to comment on any of these besides this, but you've already put it out there. You've got the guitar. For next time, you're going to have to be a master. You don't even need to be a master. You just need to have played it. That's your only homework. Um, what are you most proud of?
My daughter.
Good answer and very quick. Okay, I said I'm not commenting, but that, yeah. How do you want to be remembered?
Um, Fondly.
Any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
Yeah, don't buy a guitar. It's kind
Anything else, or we'll leave it on that one?
Look, if you want to do something, you go and give it a bash. Because despite what I jokingly said about guitars, failure is never as bad as you think it is. It's like that thing with stand up. People go, what, if you get heckled, is it bad? And you go, when it happens, like the first time or whatever, it's not as bad as you thought it was. Like it's fine. The sun will still come up tomorrow.
Good point. Very good. I'm going to plug that everywhere. That's going to be the start of the podcast. Last question before I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you. What is the one question I should have asked you?
I don't know. We covered a lot of stuff here. I think.
You did well.
Yeah. There was a lot, there was a lot of things that we covered here. So I don't think you were lacking in any questions as an interviewer. I think you did a great job, man.
Thank you. You are too kind. I appreciate it. It takes two to tango. Before we go, how can people follow you, keep up to date with you? Any additional information on the special?
At Millerick Comedy is where you can find me on the socials, and you get a link to my Linktree and website and things through there. So you can find Do Gooders there. You can find my specials, my albums. All the special is available on 800 Pound Gorilla's YouTube, but it's also on Spotify and Apple Music. There's an album version of it, and you can get my shows, Sunflower, Smile, the one I was just talking about with the stunt in it there. They're all available on wherever you get your streaming platforms. Do Gooders is available on BBC Sounds. And I have another special live at the Pleasance, which is kind of like a best of stuff that we recorded in between breaks from lockdown back in 2021. But that's kind of a best of, an hour best of all my stuff. But yeah, there's about 5 hours worth of me prattling on, and a whole sitcom you can find.
That's amazing. I'll put
Yeah,
all of that in the episode notes below. That's so good.
beautiful.
Thank you so much. I love your self-reflection. You're a very empowering guy, and yeah, thank you so much for doing this. This is amazing. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. That's really nice of you to say, and I thoroughly enjoyed this, even though you made me get out of bed super early.
So
Uh,
sorry about that. Oh.
it's been a great way to start the day.
I love how Garrett says anything worth doing is going to be difficult to do. Sometimes, and I'm especially guilty of this, is that when we have something we want to achieve, we want it right now. Garrett is brilliant and puts things into perspective and says all good things usually take time, but it is what we do with that time that counts. He explains that he's happy it took him 8 years to get his show made because it may have not been at the high standard it is now than if he got it made too quickly or before it was actually ready. To me, that's a long-term outlook and one of the many reasons why Garrett has been so successful, because he understands the long-term nature of a career as opposed to instant gratification. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. Maturity is achieved when a person postpones immediate pleasures for long-term values. Joshua L. Liebman.
Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.